Welcome everybody. For those of you who are new to the Community Leadership Summit today, we're going to have just a chat conversation. There's going to be one slide and then a whole bunch of discussion. This is a very interactive session. We encourage you to type into the chat if you want to join us on here on the stage and join the conversation. You're welcome to. We can make you a co-host. And I kind of added this to the schedule for one real simple question that's hard to answer, I think, which is, and then I'll hand over to the team to facilitate this. But, you know, we've all spent so much time in online events, and I think we're all kind of fatigued with a lot of online events. And I appreciate the irony of this is an online event. I read something the other day that a friend of mine said that it's less that it's Zoom fatigue and it's more attention fatigue. Like it's like someone demanding your attention for a consistent period of time. But then one of the challenges with online events is that unless you are really engaged in it, it can be easy to sit there and do your email and go on Facebook and whatever else. So the question today is, given what we've learned in the last year and a bit of lockdown, what are some of the things we can do to make events online much more exciting, much more engaging, much more interesting for a variety of different settings? So
okay, great first question. We will get to that. But first, let me introduce all the beautiful people that are here. So this is this talk. So I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by amazing people who, in my opinion, have done absolutely amazing things with events in person before, and then even my mind just completely blown by the work that y'all have done for virtual events. It's incredible. We are willing to keep the conversation going. This is us on Twitter. Some of us are a little more active on Twitter than others, but that's fine. I will, wait, are we missing okay, oh, I see, it just shrunk the screen. The person that I was making that comment about specifically, I all of a sudden couldn't see. But okay, so this is us. I will now take us off the screen for now so that we can see you better and answer all your questions. So we can start out with Jono's first question. Attention fatigue, I think is real. For instance, we used to run a meetup almost once a month in person, and every once in a while do an online one. And then when everything became virtual, we tried to keep that cadence up and start to run our meetup, virtually at least once a month, sometimes twice, because in the beginning, everyone was just sitting around and there was lots of, people looking for content and where they used to get it in person. And then that just went off a cliff. I mean, people hit a wall, and our meetups starting about, I would say about a year ago in the fall, especially going into the holidays, like November, around from Thanksgiving to December, where we used to have 300 people register for our meetups, we would have like 9, and even with really good topics. And it was just, we had a meetup in December with like 4 people, and then Zoom crashed in the middle of the meetup, which never happened. And we were like, okay, this is 2020 telling us no more meetings, no more virtual events. We are done looking at a screen. Let's take the holiday and go be with our families. And then we saw things pick up again. But Bart, you've built your entire community in the pandemic and on meetups virtually. So maybe that's a good question for you to start. How have you kept the attention and kept it alive?
That's wow. Thanks. First of all, thanks. Really, really nice to be here with people with so much experience, a lot more experience than myself. As Lisa said, our community did start in the very middle, middle or beginning, however you want to look at it, in July of 2020. And since then, we've done over 95 live streams, 2 KubeCons, anyway, lots and lots of different kinds of content. And it's been a process of trial and error. But if I had to say one word that it kind of comes down to that I feel also embodies a lot of the learnings of the pandemic would be empathy, is that you've really got to put yourselves in the position of the viewer, the user, and think about, what's in it for them? Why are they going to be there? And some of these other things, like what Jono was mentioning as well about attention fatigue. One of the things that we tried to incorporate, or for me, it was very, very clear since the very beginning, is that I'm not a Kubernetes expert. What I always say is that, quoting James Brown, I don't know karate, but I do know crazy. And so for me, it was very, very important from the beginning of let's incorporate other elements that you would have perhaps in a physical event, And certainly things that I've seen work in those kinds of environments, which have been a commitment to having art and music. And that's been one of the sort of hallmarks of the Data on Kubernetes community. If you go check us out on YouTube, you'll see after every live stream, I write a rap as a summary. And so we have a rap video. And so then you're like, okay, maybe Data on Kubernetes might sound a little bit strange, but I see this. And so it definitely, kind of piques my interest and shows me that this is a different kind of space. And one of the other things that's been really cool is that we have a graphic recorder who does a drawing of each talk that's in a gift to the speaker because they've given us their time. It also makes the concepts that are sometimes a little bit abstract more tangible by seeing an artistic form. And so we've had other artists that have also helped out at different points, and then also incorporating other musicians in, like last week in KubeCon, we had a musical break and we realized one of our conclusions in the retro was we should have more music, because once again, empathizing and thinking about this attention fatigue, if you have 6 talks one after the other, you're almost doing in some ways a disservice in a little way to the speaker, because if you're speaker number 6 and people have gone through 5 talks, they're going to be pretty burned out by the time they get there. So getting some breathing room in there, that's been something that that I wasn't really sure about when we started, but definitely sure now. And we all very much agree on that. And so I encourage folks to, to take a chance on that kind of stuff, because it is true, like you said, Lisa, is that you can have a great speaker and amazing content, but considering all the other content that people have been consuming up until now, I think that's where you get those kind of fatigue limits. And another thing as well, too, that Amber mentioned in the last one, in the last panel about the code of conduct video, less is more. Sitting through an hour and 30 minutes, like hands-on lab, if you're really motivated, yeah, you'll be there. But once again, I think really just empathizing with the viewers and the participants is the best way. And everybody has to decide how that empathy will kind of play itself out. But I really think that's what you got to have at the center.
I agree with, figuring out like what those attention grabbers are to kind of, keep your attention, but not make your brain just go into mush mode. Like, with a lot of events here. Before the pandemic, our event, we might have gotten 250, 300 people. But when we rolled virtual, we got up over 1,400. And that was in a 6-week time span that we had to, plan this. And what we did was we shortened our talks 20 minutes to include questions. And we said, here, if you want to talk to the presenter, go over the Slack channel and, keep talking. Not only did we see an increase in our Slack membership, but we also saw an increase, almost triple, during our event week of what our normal weekly activity would be. So that engagement picked up because we kept people's attention focused just a short amount of time. And if the people really wanted to know more, they engaged the speaker in a different medium. And we just kept a very fast paced, 20 minutes. We did the same thing. We worried about breaks, Bart. Like, when we put in 20-minute breaks, and it worked out great. So, and usually during the break time, we tried 2 different ways: having music playing during the break, or I would just pick somebody randomly and just kind of interview them in the middle of the breaks to talk to them. Either way, people stayed engaged. They only walked away for a minimum piece. So if you can find, like you said, Bart, that magic formula that kind of is the learning piece and the I want to stay engaged, but I don't have to think about piece. Like if you can create that magic combination there, it works. And so that's what we've seen with our events. So
one element of this as well in my mind is that just having variety, right? Like if it's the same event all of the time, to give you an example, a couple of things I've seen during the pandemic that resonated with me was, there's the usual kind of education events where someone presents maybe 35 minutes and then there's some Q&A. But then, for example, one thing I've seen is people doing hot seats where somebody will share their screen and they'll show something and the group will provide feedback and input on it. And those were way more interesting than I expected. I saw someone doing it with a presentation that we're planning for a conference, and they got some feedback on their slides and the design and some other ideas for some of the content. And I've also seen, for example, people sharing just a couple of minutes, like share their screen for 5 minutes and just share a tip or a trick or something along those lines in breakout groups. So my gut feeling here as well is like, just never stick to the same format over and over again, because I think people enjoy the variety.
Yeah, and one thing that KubeCon did last week that I hadn't seen, conferences are learning. So one thing I want to say is just all the conference organizers out there, great job. It's been a really, really challenging couple of years. And if you're at a conference, give your organizers a break. They are working so hard. They've had to change directions so many times as rules changed, as policies changed, different states doing different things, as company corporate policies changed. So, either had vendors like pulling out at the last minute, they've had people, just there's a whole bunch of stuff that has happened. And so just hats off to the event coordinators for just doing the best they can, honestly. And hats off to all the event managers for putting in the hard work to think outside the box and to figure out how to do this. So having said that, I almost brought this up in the last talk because it kind of speaks to inclusion in DE&I and how you can be more inclusive in your events and make people feel valued. And so since our event last week was a hybrid KubeCon, there was a virtual component and there was an in-person component. And then those of us who were there knew that that's not doing one event, that's doing two events. So you need to split your staff. Same with here today. You've got people monitoring the virtual event, you've got people monitoring the physical event. And if you're a small company, that's really, really difficult to do. And then when you have all the volunteers, so I'm a CNCF ambassador, so I was moderating 2 of the sessions. And since we're figuring this all out as we go along, there was some guidelines, just like the code of conduct. Not everybody reads them all the way through, but you don't know what you're actually reading. So you get to the session, and I got to the first session I was moderating and I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is in person and online. So I need to be the one to incorporate the online folks, make sure their questions get answered, make sure I'm talking to them, and that they're feeling like they're part of the event as well. And then one thing I learned, the session ran long and the online platform cut the online folks off right at time, but the in-room folks kept going. So I moderated the next panel. I remember that, and I was like, okay, we need to start with the online questions to make sure everyone gets their questions answered, and then we can run a little bit long in the room. So just figuring out all those little details and just thinking, how can we make sure that the hybrid event is giving the same amount of value, whether you attended virtually or hybrid. And so having said that, I want to ask JP a question because, and I will say full disclosure, I've had the pleasure of working with JP for the last year. We've only done, until last week, virtual events together. JP has made it so fun, has been so creative. Every single event was a little bit different. He figured out all the platforms and how we could really get the most out of each one. So JP, why don't you talk about some of the awesome, innovative stuff that you've done for virtual events?
Yeah, absolutely. To introduce myself to the audience here, I manage events from kind of like the company and sponsor perspective of things. So when I speak on things, I speak on behalf of a company who is working to do events for one, of course, demand generation, but also building awareness in the community of our company and our product with all developers. So when the pandemic happened, it was very scary for us because we did not know what the future was going to hold, because events were such a huge component of awareness for us as a company. So it was very scary. And I'm thankfully lucky that I work for a company that really allows me to have a lot of creative freedom, to try a lot of fun things, to fall on my face and then be successful at other things. So the biggest change that we made as a company, and this kind of goes on with the previous question as well, was our shift in tone. We went from a very, I would say our marketing in person has always been a very not intense, but our tone was very focused on we are the most evolved database out there. We're very intense. And then our shift to taking virtual events based off of empathy, as Bart talked about earlier, was about having fun. We wanted people to have fun with our brand. We wanted people to experience Cockroach TV as not just the most highly evolved database, but as this amazing company who's pushing the boundaries of doing marketing for good, but also show that we're an inclusive workplace for anyone who's looking for a job. So a couple of things that we've done is we've donated, I think in this last year, $50,000 plus to various charities. All of our raffles that we do in a virtual booth, if you submit one of our raffles, we will also donate $2 to a charity of your choice. So we've been able to contribute so much money for good in this year by doing that, as well as which I'm sure Lisa has probably regretted or very excited about. Whenever we are live on the booth, we're not necessarily doing a demo. We're not doing a presentation. That's not what people are here for. We want to get them excited about who we are as a company. So what we do is we hold games. We'll play games. We'll do dance breaks. I think my favorite of what we do is, since we are named Cockroach TD, we'll do trivia questions about cockroaches. Like, did you know a cockroach can live for a week without its head? You would never know that unless you visited the Cockroach Labs booth at a conference. So just by doing creative stuff like this, we've been able to stand out and just create an inclusive environment for everyone there.
And he's not even joking. There'd be moments, because sometimes when we were doing like a European show, the booth hours are 1:30 a.m. or 4:30 a.m., you know, for California time where I live. And sometimes the energy is waning, and it's really difficult on camera, especially when you can't always see who's in the booth. Hopin sometimes lets you see who you're talking to. A lot of platforms don't. So you have to bring that energy. And there'd be moments where JP would look at us and be like, okay, the energy is waning. I need to do something. And he'd be like, out of the blue, unbeknownst to us, dance break, and he'd start blasting some music. And what you can't see is he's got a disco ball hanging right behind his head there. And then we would just be like dancing. It was, and you know, it just like the first time he did it, I was shocked, but then I was like, okay, why not? And it just really shot the energy level up. And it's a lot of fun. So if you can have fun with it, you'll notice in the chat, I don't think I've worked an event that someone hasn't said, this is the most fun booth. I'm hanging out with you guys because you're so much fun, you know, stuff like that. So you do get rewarded, people notice, and people care. So my next question is for April. This isn't as much about virtual events, because when we worked together, we did a lot of community events, cross-company community events that were very popular. So I'd love for April to talk about how you can use events to build community, since this is the Community Leadership Summit. Hi, April. Wait, you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so Lisa and I did work together on some community events. And I think really the main takeaway here is like community events are followed by the people that lead them and not the companies. And Cloud Native Storage Day is one event that Lisa and I developed together. And it was the first ever co-located event at KubeCon Seattle in 2018. And then we planned 3 consecutive events around that.
The first ever community colo. People were buying colos individually as companies. So just to be clear, because there's probably someone listening saying, wait, I had a colo before that. The first ever community colo where we got together with, at the time, 8 different competitors, but we called them partners.
Right, yes. And yeah, so we planned 3 together in North America and in Europe to bring together end users, customers, tech experts, competitors, partners, you know, cloud native, to talk about everything cloud native storage and solutions. And it was really a community effort, and it worked well because it created a space for people to have really open discussions about lessons learned and what worked and what didn't, and solutions. And it just created an environment that encouraged collaboration and conversation. And the event also provided, you know, not only presentations, but opportunities for engagement with the attendees, with the event sponsors, as well as opportunities for the attendees to engage with each other. You know, doing things like providing breaks with activities during those times. There's some people that want to interact. You know, during those breaks, there's games like, you know, simple games like cornhole. There's other things and activities for people to do on their own, like arcade games where, you know, maybe they just kind of want to have some downtime in between those sessions. So providing opportunities for engagement or, you know, doing things on your own is really great. But I think, you know, in terms of providing content and opportunities for engagement, really being a good host to your guest is really important. Encouraging conversation, but also, caring about the food that you're providing them, knowing that you're going to get a meal that you want. And, there are dietary food restrictions that people have. Some people are gluten-free or kosher or, vegan. And so just paying attention to those details and really caring about your guests are really important. Providing good swag, making sure that you have enough for everyone, making sure that they're great, material that people will actually wear and a good style, and, providing all these other things that make it a comfortable environment for your attendees, I think is really important. It could be providing power so they could do work while you're in your sessions, and pens and notepads, and maybe even internet. But really taking care of your attendees, making sure that they're comfortable and giving them a good space to work, I think is great for building community. And when you connect with your attendees, you start to build a following. This colo that we had was repeat event over 4 KubeCons, and a lot of attendees came back for the content. There were a lot of the same sponsors, and more were added, as the events went on. But people really appreciated the environment provided and the content provided, and I think that's really important for these community events. Taking care of your guests as host and being a good host.
Yeah, I thank you for describing that. There's also a website that still lives to this day. I think the 2 points that I wanted April to emphasize is the value of going across, partnering with companies. JP mentioned it with the Partners for Good charity. 8 different companies were involved in that. And so you amplify your message. And with the CLS Day, it started out with 8, and then everyone wanted to be a part of it, 10, 12, 14 for the 4 coupons that we did it at. And it was the gift that kept on giving. The website is still up there live, cloudnativestorage.com, and all archives of all the presentations. So again, it's content that folks, that you give an opportunity to be on stage who haven't been on stage before. And April's not kidding about the t-shirts. If you make a good shirt and you have everybody's size and you have them fitted and not fitted and what everyone wants, people will actually wear them. And I kept texting April every time I saw one of our shirts. Every single time at KubeCon, I would see the shirt being worn for our colo, and I'm like, nice shirt, and they're like, oh my god, that was you, I remember you. And it's just really, really cool that people really love that kind of stuff. And so you build a brand, and when you do that across company in a very fair way with partners, and you don't charge anybody more than anyone else, and it's all just fair, and you split everything, you get so much support. So it's kind of like open source, right? That was my methodology when we were attacking it, and people said it couldn't be done. There's no way all these competitors are going to get together, and it was beautiful. And we all did it so that we could define a space. There was no Gartner Magic Quadrant for cloud native storage when we started it, and we did this to really help define this space. And so we did it together. So don't underestimate the value of partnering when you're putting your event together. It's golden. Okay, there was some questions. There was a question about Twitch. Has anyone taken to regular Twitch usage this year? Who wants to go for that? I know we have. I want to give someone else a. JP, you want to talk about the restreams and how you've managed to do the virtual across Twitch, LinkedIn, YouTube?
Yeah, I can mention that. In terms of live stream, yes, we saw as a company as a whole, like a huge, of course, as Amber has mentioned and Bart has mentioned, we've seen a huge shift towards virtual, and then that drop off happened. So at first we maximized our live stream program, then we saw the drop off. So then we had to reshape things again. And we found out as a whole that Twitch is an amazing platform, and a lot of amazing developers are there. It's not necessarily a platform that us as a company want to utilize, but encourage our developers to have a really personal touch with their audience there. And we'll support our developers to do that. So I think that's our attitude towards Twitch. And in terms of live streams, there's a lot of great platforms out there that allow you to not only, when you live stream on one platform, such as YouTube, you can then also go live on LinkedIn and various other platforms at the same time. So as much as we can restream and expand that audience to all the different platforms, we're reaching different audiences, and people can view it at their leisure, either live, but also on demand as well, which gives people, of course, that flexibility on their own schedule. And that shifts all of our thinking. We're not necessarily like looking at the success of event as being like, great, our live streams used to have 150 people on person, like attend in person, but now we've gone down to about 50. But now we're seeing a huge concentration of people watching the YouTube later or watching the LinkedIn Live later. We're still reaching the same amount of people, if not more. But it just, our thinking had to shift about it.
Yeah, has anyone else done anything with Twitch?
Yeah, I think.
Go for it.
No, go ahead. Okay, yeah, is it like more recently through the CNCF because they opened up Cloud Native TV, and I think that was kind of a sign as well too of them realizing the potential, the audience that's there, how, you know, in terms of extending reach. And once again, going back to this notion of empathy, if my audience is on there, then I should probably be on there too, and not forcing them to go on a platform that they don't find interesting or engaging. And the same thing, the same sort of debates has also happened when we talk about community engagement, whether it's Slack or Discord or both, and then also using forum tools such as Discourse. Once again, it's all about what's the experience that I'm trying to create, who are my, and who's my audience. And I think as JP was mentioning, some of the tools now like Restream or StreamYard that allow you to be in multiple places simultaneously, then from a monitoring perspective, you know, in terms of, you know, responding to questions and things like that, it just requires a little bit of foresight and planning. But I think that I encourage anyone who's in the community space, it's not that you have to be, you know, strictly stuck to one or the other, but be aware of that, and also ask your audience, ask your communities about what places they prefer to be, and what kind of experience they're looking for. So I do think that each one, you know, offers some unique characteristics that another doesn't, and you just have to be mindful of that based on your community goals and what you can commit to. But I would say that everyone, it's worth at least exploring Twitch and seeing what are the things that it can offer you that perhaps other platforms don't. So for me, it's been a big learning.
I think the reach thing is super important. You reach different people on Twitch. We find it's a great developer audience. It's a great gaming community. So the streams that have worked better for us on Twitch are like Watch Me Work sessions, where we've just got our engineers writing code, and you know, it turns out that someone will tune in on a Friday and watch someone code for 6 hours. That happens, and I'm actually one of those people that tunes in and watches people code for 6 hours. And so there's some really good Twitchers out there, and some streams that I really love. And I love how when you finish your stream, you can raid somebody else, and that's a way developers can show love to other developers and you know, pass the hat around and pass the credibility. And it's always super fun to get rated by like a huge, you know, stream that you didn't even know that person knew you existed. I mean, it's just, it's so great. So there's a lot of great things built into Twitch. Also, like all the fun, you know, there's a person on our team named Adrian. He has a corgi. So he built this thing in Twitch where Doritos and corgis sort of fall from the sky when he's live streaming and building his applications. It's nutty. So it's a great way for people to interact, because you can't just jump on and talk like this at Twitch. So if you are live streaming Twitch, the best practices that I've seen are people that read the questions out loud, you know, that really interact with every single user that comes on and says hi to people, thanks people when they follow, you know, all of that kind of interaction, because you're a one-person show. And talk about bringing your own energy. You know, you're the only one talking. So you're providing all that energy, which is probably why sitting there and writing code, you know, for hours is good for that platform when you're just by yourself. But I saw another question about swag. Did y'all see that? Do you do swags? Do you do swags differently for virtual events? That's from Ray. Hi, Ray. Thanks for joining us. Yes, people do. Does anyone want to talk about what they've done for their virtual events for swag? Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me call on people. Well, I know, again, I'm always gonna call on JP because I know what we've done. But I think the number one thing, Bart, I mean, if anyone wasn't on the session before, if you could talk about my favorite piece of swag that you've handed out is the contribution to that particular charity. So sorry for those that this is a repeat for, but Bar, can you just describe that a little bit?
Yeah, a couple of different things is in that regard, and I think everyone's kind of mentioned in one way or another. Because I know JP, you mentioned the amount that Cockroach has donated in the last year, which is amazing. I think is a great example to other folks that I think the pandemic has presented this challenge of to what extent can we continue what we were doing before? What are the new things that we need to keep in mind? And so what we've been doing as a community is interacting with a particular charity called The Last Mile that helps incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks learn programming skills to better their chances of entering in job market and things of that nature. And it's still a challenge for us too, is that we want to take that even further in the sense of what kind of extra work can we do in terms of mentoring and things of that nature. So that's still very much on the agenda. What I would also say though, in particularly in a case where it's funny that JP and I actually collaborated on this a couple months ago, and because it echoes a thing that Jono was mentioning previously in the last panel about giving incentives for things like a code of conduct, but also giving incentives for participation in live streams or meetups. Because some folks maybe don't want to turn their camera or microphone on and ask a question if that's the kind of platform you're on. So it's giving different opportunities for people to be involved. And so in this particular occasion, we had a great live stream with Keith from Cockroach talking about Kubernetes certifications. And so what we did and what we've done on other occasions is we have a lot of times younger audience members who, although they may not understand all the technical content, are very interested in being there and participating. So what we did is that, and what we've done in different live streams is that after we explained during the live stream that the person who writes the best summary on LinkedIn or Twitter we give a pretty strict time frame of saying, you got 24 hours. Write a summary, mention your key learnings, doesn't have to be super long. And so that's also why more entry-level folks who are motivated and are energetic, but it's a way to keep the conversation going and perhaps ask additional questions that maybe they didn't have time for, maybe they're a little bit shy. So we did that and got a really good post from a young woman in India who also spoke in our KubeCon co-located event last week. And so then by her doing that and we agreed that she had written the best summary, she got some Cockroach swag, she got some data on Kubernetes swag, but also personal branding, as Lisa mentioned last panel, that digital footprint, give those kinds of opportunities. There's lots of ways to do it. So like I said, that's how we did it, but there are other ways it can be done. And so anyway, so like I said, that's been a part of it. And then as I mentioned earlier, the artwork, the wraps, like things like that, it's just a way to keep the energy going. So it's not just the live stream or the meetup itself, but then you have the opportunity to continue the conversation further and allow them as well too to share that kind of content.
Yeah, Bart, I can entirely agree with you there. I'm sure April has this experience, and event managers who are on the call or around the world, as soon as you hear the words swag, you have some sort of PTSD for many different reasons. One, because people love swag. Two, swag can be very expensive, especially for startups and other companies. And three, people are starting to not like swag anymore. So you really have to try to find that balance between the three. One, I know people love swag. Everyone loves a t-shirt. With two, swag is very expensive, and especially with virtual events right now. At an in-person event, I can just bring like 100 items and I give them all away. A virtual event now, I have to go through the logistics of capturing everyone's email, like address information, and then ship that out, which then adds to the cost almost 6 or 7 times the fold of just a t-shirt that was now $10 to produce, now costs over $40 to ship across the world to send that to you. And then 3, I think we all need to think about the environmental impact of swag and other issues that are happening with swag now. Swag is very costly to produce. It adds to CO2 emissions. And 90% of the time, I bet you're not even using your swag besides a t-shirt. It probably just goes into your trash. So I think we need to think as a community about the environmental impact of swag. So it's great to think outside the box of like other things that we can do to keep people enticed. So yeah.
I agree with you. I'm glad you mentioned that, JP, because I think that's such an important point, is that I just think so much I think people like to get swag because they like the feeling of getting something, and they often don't wear it or they don't use it. I mean, I'd include myself in this list. Like the amount of swag I've received over the years that I've never really used. And you know, I don't even take t-shirts from conferences anymore because I know I'm not going to wear them. So I think it results in a challenge of how do you create swag that's just genuinely useful and interesting. Like one of the things I always love is when swag is going to be offered to someone, let's say a community member's been doing some great stuff or someone speaks at an event, is without being a creepy weirdo, is kind of trying to get a sense of what they're interested in. Like I saw someone do this where they saw that a member of their community is really into like, big dog lover, and found some really cool organic dog treats out of Portland or somewhere. And then, basically ordered them and sent them over. And it was so much more thoughtful than some t-shirt with a logo stuck on the front of it. And I think so much swag is just, it's unimaginative. And then to your point, JP, it just, the impact on the planet. I mean, the landfill and the carbon of shipping it around for it to not be used, it's maddening. So I love it when it's personable and it's and it's unique, but that's hard to scale, of course.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I would recommend, just because I've discovered them recently, there's everyone here is probably familiar with print on demand, where you can go and upload a design and a company will print it out and send it to you. You can order individual t-shirts and things like that, which I love because ordering t-shirts in bulk is a nightmare. There's a great company called Printful, and what they do is they do print on demand. They're really high quality shirts, and they do all kinds of swag, like water bottles and whatever else. But then they produce them in the region of the world that you're sending it to. So I sent a t-shirt for my band to a friend of mine who's in Romania, and they printed it, much closer to him. So it's not perfect when it comes to the carbon footprint, but it's a bit better. So.
This was a big challenge during COVID. I just saw a note in there about, local, during a lot of the events, particularly KubeCon EU, and also actually almost all the virtual events, the Linux Foundation events, a huge majority of the folks that have come to our booth and the developer conferences, like Developer Week, have come from India. There's a lot of developers in India. It's a lot of time first-time conference goers, not able to travel to these events before, loving the virtual experience. And we're trying to create an equal experience for virtual events as we are for in-person. We still want to create those moments. It's not just about the lead. It's about creating the experience and the moments and having a good, getting the brand out there and having a good feeling about that. And so we were one of the few companies that we knew that figured out how to ship to India because we found a distribution center there. Unfortunately, during COVID, it closed. And also the postal service, whatever the equivalent is, the postal service there was like such a mess. And so just getting the swag to the end user was incredibly difficult. And we even tried shipping from the US, and it became prohibitively expensive. So we've been just asking people, either wait and we'll get it for you another time, like whenever the distribution centers open up, or have patience, or in some cases we've just offered gift cards. Whether it's DoorDash or something, it's not going to be branded, but at least it's showing somebody that you're trying to make that connection, and it's cheaper in the end to give a $25 gift card, and probably deeply meaningful because they get to spend it on whatever they want, than getting a t-shirt, which would have been fun and cool, but not as practical. So that's another thing you can do. Virtual event, virtual gift. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I've focused on working for a small startup, we've just found that it's easier to focus on raffles as well, and just giving one big prize to one attendee. There's only one shipment. Everyone has a chance to win, and we found that that's been really useful. Now our audience is mainly in the US, so we haven't had to deal with international attendees, so that's worked out really well for us. Giving things like, I have them here in my living room, Nintendo Switches, or, Lego's Star Wars Imperial Destroyer sets and things like that. So
I get
another
one
idea.
That's an interesting point. I see Eugene's point in the comments. It's funny. Sometimes we've given people a choice. And so we've had, you can choose the t-shirt, you can choose the mug, or you can choose to donate to a charity. And it's been pretty much split across third by third by third, but by demographics, not so much. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, JP, and anyone else who's done the same thing. In India, the number one choice was the t-shirt, and almost zero wanted to do the donation to charity. So we just found that's different. And I don't know if it was just a younger demographic or, just enthusiasm about actually getting a thing because they're not conference fatigued out like Jono and doesn't have every piece of swag on the planet, or, but giving someone a choice and finding what the right piece of swag is, and knowing your audience. So when we did something in FinServe, we did a branded whiskey bottle. Sorry, Jono, I didn't invite you because I know you would have lined up for that one. But it was literally a whiskey bottle with a cockroach on it. And, then we got to make jokes and people tweeted it out. They loved it so much. And I was like, don't forget to eat the cockroach at the bottom of the bottle. That might be skeeved a few people out, but, just have fun with it, know your audience, and really try to tailor it so that it is something useful, gets used, gets appreciated, doesn't get wasted. Okay, we've got another question. So what's the shortest online event folks have done? Oh, this is interesting. And Jonna, you should probably also talk about why short events aren't always the best. But anyone want to go for that? What's the shortest online event you've done?
I think the shortest I've ever done was 30 minutes.
That's a webinar. That doesn't count.
Yeah, I guess I should ask for qualification on what you mean by online event. Like, do you mean a conference, or do you just mean a live stream, or do you mean you popped in to give a quick lightning talk? Because that could be the shortest if it was a lightning talk. But conferences are usually half a day or a day.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Webinars are usually an hour. I would say no more than an hour.
Well, let me chime in on this about webinars and short events, because the advantage that you have now within like virtual events versus in person, with virtual, you're creating an asset that can really live on. So no matter how short or long the event is, you now have this on-demand resource that you can use, convert into a blog post. You can put it on YouTube. Like, that becomes social. You can take those quotes and put them elsewhere. So when you're creating a virtual event now, you don't just think about the event itself, but think about how many different amazing content that you're creating for other people later.
I completely agree. Like you said, those it could be, because what we do as well too, for example, some webinars lend themselves better if it's more like a fireside chat. That's a great podcast. You can listen to that, like that. So that piece of content can go somewhere else. Then you can also put those things into a blog. Like I said, you want to think out of every single thing that you're doing, how much can you extract from that? One other thing that I would add that we started doing recently, and I would say is a sort of shorter, and you can decide on how long you want it to be, has been doing Twitter Spaces. So we've done Twitter Spaces that have gone shortest, probably 15 minutes. But once again, because we're now in this big podcast boom, so like just audio-based kind of content, and also that's very participatory. People can engage and get involved. They raise a hand, they ask a question. So once again, that gives people the opportunity to do that. So that's been something that we've been adding that I would say is on the shorter side. In terms of webinars, like Lisa said, generally around an hour.
And Jono, you made up a really interesting point of something I hadn't actually thought about before when we were talking about the length of a stream or the length of a webinar, because I was thinking shorter, sweeter, no one's going to watch something for an hour, but you were thinking, it depends on what your goal is. And if your goal is in terms of, SEO or like getting found other places, or, all that opportunity to transcribe your talk, all those extra keywords that are out there. What are your thoughts on what the length should be?
My view is that it depends somewhat on the temperature of your audience. So I think if you've got an event for, let's say, existing community members who know that they're going to get some value out of the event, then you can go long, right? I've seen people do 2-hour webinars and workshops, 3-hour webinars and workshops. But I think if we're talking about people who are brand new to a community, they don't know a community or a brand, they're cold traffic, then asking someone for an hour of their time is a huge ask. And we've kind of got to go overboard in giving them a huge amount of value. So if it's going to be a training session, like really helping them to get very specific on what they're going to get out of it, and providing worksheets and templates and stuff like that. So I think it depends a little bit. I think what's fascinating to me about webinars is where they're typically used in a sales context. The general view is for every $1,000 of product you want to sell, you need an hour's worth of webinar time. That's in the sales world. And I've been thinking about how that maps the community. And I think in many ways, it's like for each level of impact that you want your community to have, you probably need more time. So, so if you want somebody to kind of come and co-run an event with you, you're probably going to need quite a bit of time with them. So, but yeah, again, I think it depends a lot on the temperature of the traffic and how familiar they are with what you're doing. So,
Johnny, you do a lot of on-demand stuff, and how are you seeing that play into your live stuff? Like I know folks in our community that I'm in, like they wait until we put the recordings online and they go back and watch them. We see this huge spike in people being able to come to an event on their own time in their own place. You also have on-demand stuff. Are you seeing where on-demand is better for some goals of an event versus live?
right.
Like this, like what are you
Yeah,
seeing?
it's interesting. And just for everyone, like when Amber's saying on demand, that's usually like kind of like an automated style webinar where you register and then you get like a session. I've experimented quite a bit with this, and you never ever fake it, never pretend you're live, obviously, because that'd be unethical. But I found that the on-demand sessions, you get super high conversion in terms of people registering, but you get really massive dropouts in terms of people dropping off. And I found overall with webinars and automated webinars, the replay rate tends to be between 10 and 12%. So I found if you want to do long form content, it's better to just put it up on YouTube and have a YouTube channel, because the production's better. I think when people go to YouTube, they're going there to be educated. Like it's an intent-based platform. So I feel like you generally get better results. But I can't remember, it may have been JP who made this point earlier on, that when you run an event, you get all this amazing content. The thing I found to be the most effective way of doing this is like trimming out like 2 to 3 minute videos of an event and putting it up on social, like no more than 2.5 minutes though, because again, social media is an interrupt driven platform, so people are in the middle of doing something else and they're not going to sit there and watch a 25-minute video generally. But I found that actually taking, like, let's say a live webinar and putting it up on YouTube, maybe it's just what I'm seeing, but I just haven't really seen a huge amount of traction there. But when it's reconsumed into small pieces, loads of traction. So
Yeah, and you can put timestamps in those, and you can tweet out certain timestamps.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Lisa. YouTube videos, when you do timestamps or when you put it on YouTube, it automatically helps your SEO rating. So when searchable on Google, it will automatically pop up more. So
yeah,
that really helps with on-demand, is having that SEO there.
Yeah, it's kind of like the big debate in the YouTubers world right now, right? Is that people are adding in timestamps because YouTube want to push that, and like you say, JP, it's getting great SEO, but a lot of YouTubers are worried that people aren't going to watch their whole videos, and YouTube optimizes based upon watch time. So
Yeah,
we'll see how it shakes out, but yeah.
Yeah, Justin made a great point in the chat about putting your event across a more rather than like a whole weekend, right? You're just doing it across a period of time of weeks and in shorter installments. And I have actually only seen one event do that. I think it was the Open Infrastructure Foundation went and did the Open Infrastructure Summit, like over a period of months, just an hour at a time. And I loved that. I thought that was such a great idea. And I'm really surprised I don't see more of that happening. And I'm not sure why. So yeah, that's a great thought, Justin. And I hope more people pick up on that. Is Jason joining us? one of my favorite people that I haven't actually seen, but I expected to see here because we're at ATO. Hi, Jason, welcome. You have
Hello.
popped into the virtual events to build communities, or some title such like that, talk at CLS Day. So I'm not sure if that was intentional, but were you lurking? Were you listening the whole time when you're just joining us now?
I have a talk at 4 or at next in
Ah.
10 minutes. So I was making sure everything was working, but happy to hang out with the end of the conversation because it's, from what I heard, it's sounding good so far.
Yeah, it's been great. And as we know, I mean, you've been a CLS alum for many years, and I think it's just incredible that Jono has so effectively transitioned it to a virtual event for the last 2 years, and I've been super happy to be a part of it. And I still have felt the same, level of energy and all the love for the community and community building. And it actually, I had some very shy members on my team that were brand new to community building and dev advocacy during last year's CLS Day, and they really appreciated the access to some of the thought leaders in building communities where they wouldn't have been able to travel to the live event. So really appreciate all of the efforts to make this a very positive community virtual event. Thank you, Jono.
Yeah, no, it's great. CLS only works when people show up and have conversations. So I appreciate all the efforts. Yeah, this is great. It's a great conversation. Loads of new ideas, fresh ideas. Again, in a heavily populated kind of content, which is online events in the last year and a half, however long we've all been stuck inside. So just so everybody knows, in 9 minutes, Jason is going to be facilitating our discussion about how to reward great contributions. So the idea is to really just dig into the litany of different ways in which people can participate in communities, writing code, writing documentation, creating content, speaking at events, governance, all of these different pieces. What can we do to really identify and reward people effectively? So we'll do what we normally do. I'm going to share my screen, put the little slide on to show.
Wait, before you do that, Jono, can I just think?
Oh, do you want to reshow yours?
Yeah, just to.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, wait, hang on. Why do I always do this? Everybody puts great links and stuff, and then it takes over the actual thing that I was actually trying to show. So give me one moment before, and I can figure out where that is. Sorry about that. Oops. Okay. I will because I just really want to thank all the amazing people who rallied together. I know it's not everybody's comfort zone to talk at these things, but it's just super awesome when everybody does. So this is us. These are our Twitter handles. If you want to keep the conversation going or just reach out on LinkedIn, however you want to connect, we would love to connect with you. And it was really a pleasure to share the stage for the first time, actually, with some of you. And nice to finally meet you, Amber. Thank you so much for co-hosting this.
Likewise.
Yeah, and thanks JP and April and Bart and just everybody always being there and trusting me when I ask you to trust me and to come and do this. And you all have so much to give. And so I'm really grateful that you gave us your time today. So thanks everyone. Here's how you connect with us in case you missed us earlier. Link us in, tweet at us, and we'll keep the conversation going. So with that, can we give everybody a round of applause? Thank you.